I want to start by just getting a show of hands, if you don't mind. Could you put your hand up if you're in an early years site, if that's your area of specialty? Okay. If you're in a primary years? And if you're in secondary? Okay. Many more early years and primary years people here who would be immediately thinking, this guy is from the SACE Board, that's senior secondary education, what has this got to do with me? Could you put your hand up if you were thinking that? Well done, thanks for your honesty. All right, I'm going to try and answer that question as best I can. But I want to start with a challenge for us. And that challenge is, have you heard this statement? So this might be said in a primary setting. I teach children. A secondary teacher teaches subjects. You heard that? Okay. Is that correct? All right, good. So I'm going to suggest that neither of those is actually correct. So you teach children something, whether they're in primary school or high school. What's the something and what do you do to those young people? And I'm going to use your slide there as the split screen pedagogy. As for me, the strongest connection between what we do in the SACE and what you do every day, whether that be in an early years centre of primary or a secondary site, is you actually teach young people to come to understand themselves as learners and to develop knowledge, but to be inquirers so they can create new knowledge. And I'm really taken by that because sometimes you can focus on the learning area content in order to help the student develop a disposition or a capability. And other times through the capabilities you can be getting them to learn something about the content. An example of that in a Chinese school that I visited was calligraphy. They study that. They do it, and they got me to do it as well. And I was terrible at it. But the educator explained to me, you know what, we're not just teaching them how to do this. We're actually teaching them persistence. And we're teaching them what it means to value your history and your culture. That's what we're doing. And I thought, isn't that amazing? They're doing the split screen pedagogy, and they can even explain it. Now, why I'm taken by that is most curriculum in the world is both and. It does two things at once. It develops people to be citizens and learners. Now, it's really important. I'm going to share with you some of the curriculum that we look at the SACE Board. Now, this is going to be of interest, I think, even if you're in a primary school setting or an early childhood setting, for the philosophy, because you would strongly argue that your curriculum has a philosophy. Well, all senior secondary curriculum has a philosophy. It's just understanding what it is and being able to articulate it. The first one is the International Baccalaureate Diploma, created in 1968. Was first introduced in Geneva. It was a curriculum there for diplomats, and they wanted their children to be able to access curriculum no matter where they travelled. And they had the first time, they clearly articulated, well, what's the point of the curriculum? And the point of the curriculum was to do two things. One, it was to build knowers, young people who knew things, but also could inquire into new knowledge. So in about 1974, they introduced the theory of knowledge and the extended essay as key parts of the International Baccalaureate Diploma. It's really the amalgamation of the French baccalaureate system and the English system. So there are 6 subjects, but they're not equal. They're 3 higher levels, 3 standards. And instead of studying them end to end, like they do in the English system, they study them at the same time. So over 2 years, they're studying those subjects. That's to develop their depth and breadth and the extended essay theory of knowledge. And all of this community action and service is about developing them as people. So that's the philosophy. You're going to be a knower, but you're going to be an inquirer, and you're going to be able to take that and change the world. Then I want to talk to you about the next one, which is Singapore-Cambridge matriculation, 2001. Singapore's the best education system in the world according to PISA. What's really fascinating about that is Singapore does not want to be Singapore. Singapore wants to be more innovative. It says despite being the best system in the world, most employers of Singaporean workers argue that they are hardworking, they are knowledgeable, but they are not risk takers and they're not innovative. And to try to address that, made some curriculum changes. And it's really interesting. If you drew the Singapore senior secondary curriculum, in the middle is life skills, the first thing, the most important part. Then around that is the capacity to be able to inquire, knowledge skills. And then around that are their subjects, and that's the subject-specific information. And their argument is that you develop all three of those through the curriculum, but the subjects help you develop the knowledge, help you develop you as a person, and developing you as a person helps you develop your knowledge in the subjects. So that's about 2000, 2001. The next one is Cambridge Pre-U. So Cambridge is the biggest provider of education around the world. The IGCSE, you might have heard about that, the International General Certificate of Secondary Education, is offered in 130 countries or thereabouts. And then they offer the A-levels. And this is a particular qualification that they offered from 2007. And it's to prepare young people for university. So they do 3 A-levels, but they do what is called global perspectives and research. The idea there is the young person learns more about the world and about him or herself, and they're an inquirer, and they can actively take that into university and develop more knowledge, but importantly recognise the limits of what they do know. Most of us know really clearly what it is we do know, but the capacity to know what you don't know and then be able to fill that is very important. Thirdly is the AQA Baccalaureate. Biggest provider in the UK is the AQA. So they offer this baccalaureate in direct competition to the International Baccalaureate. They offer it in China and Malaysia, which is how we've come to know it. And the idea there is that there is breadth in curriculum, but the heart of curriculum is the kind of person you are going to be. And so they make compulsory community service, compulsory involvement in activities beyond the classroom, and you must undertake your own research and you must study subjects. Then there's the SACE. Did you know that the SACE was based on all of these? It's really important. So that's not well explained. But the SACE is a qualification. It's not just a set of subjects. It's about a kind of learner that you're trying to promote. And the key parts of the SACE were the breadth of 200 credits, the depth of 60 credits at stage 2, but also the capacity to think about yourself as a learner. That's the underpinnings of the personal learning plan. Who am I? What am I good at? What am I going to do next? How do I do that so I can become the kind of young person I'm entitled to be? And then the capstone course, the research project. Can I do that on my own around something I'm passionate about? Do I know how to inquire? Can I phrase a question? Can I explore that question? Have I got a folio of research that I can explain? Have I got an outcome? Have I got an evaluation of who I am as a learner and what I need to do next? That was the SACE. That is the SACE. And lastly, you got the IB career-related program, 2014. Again, same philosophy. We're going to take subjects and build them around the person as an inquirer, the person as a member of the community. Now, why I share those with you is they've got 3 things in common. They've got a core, a philosophy. You can explain what it's about. Secondly, they've all got research. And the understanding is that a young person must be an inquirer. Now, every day in the early years framework, you are about building young people to be inquisitive, to inquire, to ask questions. You build on that. And lastly, they make the claim that the qualification as a whole and subjects in particular allow young people to develop the kinds of attributes that they need in order to be successful citizens, individuals, and learners. Now, if that's the case, you would have to teach like that, because you can't possibly do both of those things without making that the most important thing that you did in the classroom. So if you're a teacher of senior secondary curriculum around the world, you must be trying to develop the young person's knowledge and the young person as an inquirer and as a person at the same time. Now, our question is, to the extent to which do we do that at the moment? Could we do it better? So what I'm going to talk to you about is that vision of a learner. Then I'm going to talk to you about curriculum and how it can help us promote that. And lastly, about the capabilities and some where to next. But first of all, I'm going to ask you a question. So I understand you're all in partnerships. There's early years, there's primary, and there's secondary schools all in these partnerships. And I understand today that there are a number of people who are in the early years wondering, what's this guy talking about? And the primary is thinking, yep, this is okay, but I'm not a secondary teacher. And the secondary years, what I want you to think about is, what do you all have in common? What do you talk about? What's the connection between the early years, the Australian curriculum, and the SACE? Okay, quickly, tell the person next to you. You would have talked about a lot. Now, I'm going to try to answer that, and I'm going to suggest that the connection is my daughters, or any young person for that matter. And I'm presuming when you come together in your partnerships, you talk about awesome children becoming awesome teenagers. Is that right? Is that what you talk about? Because that's what you're supposed to do. That's what we're supposed to do. That's why we're in education. And what's amazing about that is sometimes we can get caught out talking about all the things that we don't have in common, that we can occasionally forget about the very thing that we do have in common, which is young people and their education, their growth, their development from small, inquisitive child to teenager who understands inquiry and can pose a question and can develop a folio of research and an evaluation and an outcome. That a young person is entitled to be able to do that, and we have that opportunity. So I'm going to suggest to you that the connection between the early years framework, Australian curriculum, and the SACE is a young person, and that young person's growth and development. And I'm going to suggest to you that we have a responsibility to ensure that they grow into awesome teenagers. Now I'm going to ask you, when you talk in your partnerships, have you got a clear vision of that young person, of my daughters? Do you know how to monitor that vision as it's going? Do you? Quickly, talk to the person next to you. Do you have a vision? Yes, you do. No, you don't. Can you describe what that young person's going to be like? Now, I purposely made that question a bit tough. And then I'm going to ask you as leaders in schools and in early learning centres in primary schools, when you talk to the parents, when you talk to the teachers, when you talk to the young people themselves, how do you describe the young person in front of you? How do you describe their growth and their development? How do you keep all of the conversation about curriculum and STEM and literacy and numeracy and Big Six and really Big Seven and all of those things into something that makes sense? Right, we can do it because it's already there for us, because we're not running blind on this. There is already a vision. Now, the early years framework I'm not an expert on by any means, but I really, really like it. And it's going to be the basis of this whole presentation, of being able to take things as we've done them and rebuild them in a new way. And I've got a clear vision there. What I like about that is it says all children. So they're all children, every one of them, in your partnerships, all of them. They should be like that. Now, my question to you is, when you're talking to the children and you're talking to the teachers and you're talking to the families, what does it look like to be one of those children? And the answer is, it looks like this. These things are capabilities. So as I understand that framework, and I really like the belonging, being, becoming, I have often got the order incorrect though. We've since addressed that. But my sense is that if you think about your partnerships, I don't think a young person throughout that partnership ever stops belonging, being, or becoming. I would suggest that's a through line. And I would suggest to us that we haven't stopped that either. So I think it gives us something to aim on. So if you're going to get a sense of belonging, you know, that part of a community, you're connected. You're part of a family, you're part of society, you're going to make a difference. And being the kind of person that you are now and becoming that kind of person you're entitled to become, what would that look like? And the capabilities describe that. Every young person should be like that. Now then again, what about in the Australian curriculum? Well, there is a vision. The Melbourne Declaration says, you know, every young person, again it says all, will be a successful learner. They're going to be a confident and creative individual, and they're going to be an informed and active citizen. Every one of them. Now, to me, that's how you describe when you're talking to young people, you're going to be like that. You're entitled to be like that. That's what an awesome teenager is. That's what an awesome adult is. And then they're going to say, well, how would I know one of those kids when I fell over them? Do you know the answer to that? Well, in the Australian curriculum, it says they've got these things, capabilities. The beginning of every subject describes the capabilities and how they can be developed through those subjects, and then gives you the content. The challenge is to not get blindsided by the actual purpose of the curriculum, which is to develop the kind of people to be like that, and run down the content area and say, well, I've got to teach this and I've got to teach that. Of course you do. But you've got to teach that in a larger sense of the kind of person and citizen that you're actually contributing to, helping to shape. Now, this isn't just in Australia, this is around the world. So here's Cambridge International Examinations. Describe a student. They describe it quite beautifully like that. All of the things that we would imagine being the case, that young people should be able to be successful in their own right, but also able to change the world. How do you know one of those kids when you bump into them? Well, it tells you they're like this. They can work in teams, they can work with themselves, they're responsible, they're critical and creative, they're inquirers. What about the International Baccalaureate? Well, there's the vision of the young person. That's what that young person is and is going to be. Well, how do you know one of those when you see them? They have the learner profile. Describes the kind of learning that is apparently developed through the qualification and the subjects. Can you see the messages here? This is about re-articulating what it is that you do every day in a way that's going to make sense. So a curriculum looks like this. It has a vision. It says the learner is going to be this. And then it suggests, well, those things come out in capabilities or in a learner profile or in learner attributes or whatever it is that you want to describe them. And then when you step back from that, the purpose of any qualification, the purpose of any subject, the purpose of any stage of schooling, presumably, would be to develop those capabilities and those qualities in order to achieve the vision. Can you see it? All right, so what might be some of the impediments that stop us thinking that way? Some people argue that the SACE is one of the impediments. Because they say, well, that's all well and good, but if you're not going to assess it and if it's not going to be in subjects, then how could we possibly do it? And so our SACE Board has said, well, hold on a minute, if that's true, then we need to do something about it. But conversely, if we do something about that, we'd drive a bit of change, wouldn't we? That's really important for us, to think about what it is we're actually promoting in our curriculum, in our qualifications, in our subjects, and how we could support the work that you want to do in your partnerships from early years through. We've also got some other exciting bits. So according to OECD, they kind of imagined curriculum in 2030 and what it would look like. And to me, it is wonderful construction of all it is that we imagine it to be now, but made clearly explicit. That curriculum is about developing multiple things at once. And most powerfully, it's about a person developing his or her capabilities, attributes, dispositions, attitudes, values. So I'm thinking that's a trigger. But in the meantime, we can do some things at the SACE Board. So we're doing two things. We're renewing our subjects, and we're also promoting a cross-sector, cross-all-year levels way of looking at young people's development. So with our subjects, the board can manage this. It's really important because we do have legislative responsibility for the subjects, and we could develop those in a way that promotes the capabilities more so than they do now. We also have to deal with the tension, though, of, well, what's the value when I leave school? Is it the ATAR? Is that all that matters? And or is it the learning that I take with me? And it's a hard conversation to have. Even when I talk to young people, when I was a principal, they would say to me at the end of it, all that matters is my ATAR. And I said, well, actually, on your 21st birthday, when your parents are standing up talking about you, they're probably not going to mention your ATAR, even if it was fantastic. They're probably going to talk about the kind of person you are. They're going to talk about your commitment to other people, your commitment to the world. They're going to talk about why you are the fantastic daughter or son that you are. They're going to talk about you as a learner. They're going to talk about how proud they are of your resilience and how proud they are of the way that you can interact with others. That's what they're going to talk about. So how about we work on that while we're here at school? And how about if you did that, I reckon your ATAR probably will take care of itself. The other thing is about the ATAR is if the 24,000 smartest people in the world moved to South Australia and sat Year 12, do you know of the 24,000 smartest people in the world, 12 of them would get an ATAR of 0. Did you know that? Because it just ranks all the smart kids. That's all it is. Wow. Isn't that interesting? So it's probably not a good way of judging young people as learners. Might be a good way of getting lots of people into courses when you need it, but it might not tell everybody what you want it to tell. But a story of the person as a learner is more powerful than that. So we're doing our renewal, and our board has said to me, Chief Executive Neil, listen, we don't want any rubbish here. We need to know exactly what it is you're telling those writers, those reference groups, what's being consulted on, and we need to know good curriculum when we see it. So they've asked us to develop what we've called KPIs, and that is, what is it that we're trying to do in driving the curriculum renewal? And the first one is the capabilities. You're going to see them, a strong through line from the design of the subject all the way through to the assessment. Because our teachers tell us, if you assess it, we'll do it. If you don't assess it, we might not do it. I don't know if that's the case in your school, but that's what we hear. So we're saying we better assess it. But the more important question is it important? Because if it's important, it should be assessed. And that's an easier way of going about it. So we're doing this work at the moment across all of those subjects. And one that we've just released is digital technologies. This is the performance standard. So this is when teachers are developing assessments and making judgments. They use the performance standards. And in there, you're going to see clearly referenced the student's capacity to demonstrate those capabilities. So they have to be taught, they have to be valued. You're going to see the ethical considerations, but you're also going to see collaboration. Apparently it's important. So if it's important, it needs to be in the curriculum. And if it's going to be in the curriculum, it needs to be in the assessment, otherwise somebody will make a judgment themselves about that. So the board said, let's get that organised. Now we're also going out more strongly with trying to explain what the subjects are about. So the digital technologies, people should be able to say, the purpose of studying digital technologies is to become this kind of learner. Scientific studies, PE, it doesn't matter. What's the point of the subject? Describe the point of the subject and then the assessment takes care of itself, because you have to find evidence that then allows you to make a decision that you've developed that kind of learner. This is one example on our website.
Creative arts is a subject that has a lot of flexibility in it and allows students to develop skills that they really, really want to learn. And in today's society and in the future going forward, we have to be innovative and creative, and this subject gives them the tools to do that.
I chose to study creative arts because I've always loved acting and the performing arts in general, so I really wanted to extend my skills in this area as well as have that contribute to my SACE.
With creative arts, our class was full of so many different people who got to do whatever they wanted and express themselves how they wanted to. Being able to look at what I like and how I want to do it gave me the opportunity to develop those skills so that when I got to uni, I was already capable of expressing myself how I want to.
Okay. Now in finishing, I want to suggest what the board has contemplated doing, and that is turning everything on its head and building from the bottom up, from the early years framework up, and saying, well, how might we add to this so that we are not seen to be contradicting that, but so that we are contributing to a whole of life story for a young person in South Australia. And so what we're trying to do is across the three sectors is to recognise that that belonging, being, becoming is what it is we have in common with all of our young people. And that if the early years framework defines, or if you like, describes capabilities like that, they must surely be connected to the capabilities in the Australian curriculum and to the SACE. Now the powerful part, if that's not enough, of the early years framework is it actually gives some, as I understand it, some ways that you might as a teacher promote those capabilities in your classrooms, in your learning experiences that you provide. Now for us, if the Australian curriculum is written with the first half being all about the capabilities and the next part being all about the content, then it's important we provide more opportunities for teachers to be able to do both and. Develop this while you're developing the content. Understand the content, reflect back on the kind of learner you are and the person you want to be. So we get a chance to make a connection there. But then the teacher quite rightly would say, well, what does it look like when someone is developing those capabilities? What does that look like at each year level or at each stage of schooling? So could we have some description of that evidence just so that we can draw our attention to it? Again, that's modelled on the early years framework. And lastly, I'm going to suggest that this might be the next frontier for all of us. And that is, what is the role of the child in your partnership? And what is the role of the child in curriculum? And I would suggest that if we could get to the point where the young person actually talks about him or herself as a learner and a person and can make a connection between their development and the curriculum and see the curriculum as supporting their development, then we've actually created a young person who is going to be successful no matter what he or she does. So my dream, and I've mentioned this before, is when I go to the parent-teacher interviews and I have my soon-to-be 12-year-old, it's going to be 12 on Wednesday, and my 10-and-a-half-year-old running the interview. And then I want them to tell me and to tell my wife how they are going as learners. And I just wanted to, how have you changed as a learner this year? How have you changed? That would be it. Tell me. And they need a frame to do that, and I reckon the capabilities gives them a chance to do that, but how have you changed? How have you grown? If they can manage that metacognition, I think, is at the bottom of what it means to be a knower and an inquirer, but also what it will mean to be a kind of creative individual and informed and active citizen. You know, the capacity to discern, to skip the new idea as you walk through, to move the advertiser away and read something else, that sort of discernment. And more powerfully in curriculum, to understand who they are as learners and what they're going to do next. So for us, that would be a way of connecting all of our work, building from the young person, awesome child up, and making sure that that awesome child is an awesome teenager. And that awesome teenager is going to be a citizen of the future and is going to be making some really big decisions. I want them all to be capable of doing that. So our suggestion about that is that we work together across all three sectors. It's pretty complex, but not really. You build it as you go and you start with the vision. What's the vision of the young person? Articulate that. Find a connection between all the different ways we describe capabilities from early years through to the graduate qualities of universities, who, by the way, are now required to demonstrate how those graduate qualities are developed in their own courses. Similar concept for us. And then lastly, you think about the teachers who are entrusted to understand that curriculum in a way that allows them to teach young people to grow as people and as learners at the same time. If we could do that together, we would make a huge difference to young people here, but to our whole community. And essentially, that's what our role is as educators. That's why you would come here. That's why you would go back into your school tomorrow or the day after, whenever it is, excited to say, you know what, that wasn't too bad, that learning there. I learned something, I'm going to try it. So that's our challenge. Thank you very much. I hope you have a good conference.